So, you open Google Chrome on your phone, you're rushing to buy tickets to a concert that all your friends are going to. Picture yourself now, crowd surfing to the front, being invited onto the stage, backstage the world tour, and before you know it, you're dancing in Tokyo. Wait, what? 3 tickets left? It's a good thing your saved payment details autofill quickly and securely. There's no place like Chrome. Download Google Chrome on your phone.
It's not a rumor. I'm back. And in my first Netflix show, Fuba, ready to get pumped up to crush every episode, to see things explode before you, and to burst out laughing with your women. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but you're only gonna get all of the high-octane action that I have to offer. Bullet trains, helicopter chases, pure unfiltered action. So put that cookie down, get to the chopper, and watch Fuba. Now streaming only on Netflix.
Another Wednesday, aka the edition of the Strictly Stripes podcast. We got the whole trio back after 5 days now? Got Mohammad here with you, yours truly, along with Andrew Gillis and Mike Niziolek. Andrew, he was too cool for us the last 2 days. He was in Charlotte, North Carolina at, I'm probably going to get this wrong, or no, I think this was the right place. You were at the Coca-Cola 600. Is that where you were at, Andrew, in Charlotte?
That is correct.
How was that? I don't know much about car racing or NASCAR, any of that. I don't even know if that's NASCAR, but what was so cool about that? I know it got delayed to Monday from the weekend, so tell me what that was like.
Yeah, so it was a NASCAR race. It's the longest one on their circuit. NASCAR events are really fun. I'd recommend them to anyone. I am like the most casual NASCAR fan you could possibly imagine. Like, I probably could have told you like 15 or 20 drivers out of like a field of 42, and that was it. I'm not super, connected to it. But they're just really fun days. Like, I got lucky. Me and my buddy went down. We have a couple friends that live in Charlotte. So we were able to stay with them for free. That was really nice. We were able to do that. They were great hosts, and they were not bothered at all by the fact that the race got postponed. NASCAR is a little bit different than like any other outdoor sport. If there is, if there is an ounce of rain on the track, they will send out track dryers to try and make sure that thing is dry for the race. But yeah, it's a really fun event. Like, you can bring in your own coolers, so you can bring in beer, soda, water, food. You can bring in whatever you want. It's a really cool day. And if you've ever been to a NASCAR race, you know what I'm saying, but like the noise that they make when they come around the turn, it's just, it's unbeatable. It's a really cool thing. So, I'm glad I was able to do it. It was fun to step away for a few days and kind of go see all that and go do all that. So yeah, it was a good time.
Mike, are you a NASCAR guy? Do you like to watch racing?
No, I've never watched a race in my life.
So that makes me feel good. That makes me feel good because that means I'm not alone. I feel good.
People get really into F1 because there's the Netflix series, like Drive to Survive or whatever it's called. I still haven't watched that. But like people get really into F1, and I know that like that is becoming more and more popular. But yeah, like NASCAR used to be really popular. It's fading in popularity for sure, but it's really fun. They're just kind of fun, mindless activities to do for a day. I enjoy it a lot.
Fun, mindless activities. Well, I will say Charlotte's a nice city. And a matter of fact, the last time I was in Charlotte, I unknowingly ran into Mike and didn't realize it until 3 years later, because we were both covering the Belk Bowl. I'd never met him. I didn't know he was there until we talked about it, I think, on one of the very first podcasts we ever did back in October. Which is still funny to me just thinking about that. But yeah, that's a good place. Glad you had a good time. Jumping back into the Queen City, obviously the interesting talking point I wanted to ask you guys about. So first of all, I think we're all in agreement on this, but I have to make sure we're all in agreement. So of course, the biggest free agent on the market right now is DeAndre Hopkins. Cardinals cut him last Friday. He becomes a free agent once his papers processed on Tuesday. He hires an agent from Cleveland that same day. let's just make sure we all agree that the Bengals will not and should not and will never consider DeAndre Hopkins on their team ever. For
Yeah,
now.
there's just no room. It doesn't really make any sense. I don't know if you have the cap space. I looked this up on Over the Cap. They have $14.91 million in cap space. That's fine if you're going to do a multi-year deal. I just don't understand, kind of where you would do that. There's not really room for him, unless you want to move T. Higgins or Hopkins to the slot, or I mean, I guess you want to move Jamar to the slot. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, they weren't. They have a full wide receiver room, and no spots to really fill. I don't think that there's any space for him. I don't think that it would work out contract wise either. Not every free agent's consideration for every team, and I don't think he's a fit with the Bengals.
He's too old. He's going to turn 31 next week. He's too expensive. I mean, you look at how much dead cap the Cardinals are eating. I think it's almost, $23 million, which is what Spot Track says he's worth annually. So too expensive, too old. I don't really trust his production. I'm not saying he can't play decently, but his last 2 years in Arizona are concerning, partially because he had a 6-game suspension for using performance-enhancing drugs, and then the year before that, he missed the final 4 weeks of the year with a torn MCL. So injuries, age, concerns, not worth it. And at that point, if you're going to pay him all that money, why not just give it to T. Higgins? Why not just maybe, because we talked about this yesterday, why not maybe try to negotiate something with Tyler Boyd if you want to keep him around for a little while longer, even if it's just for a year, 2 more years, because he'll be 30 next year. He's still 29, or he will be 29. It just doesn't make sense to me. But what I really wanted to talk about, though, now that we're all on the same page, is, I think you think about all the teams that are considering him, like the Browns, or that he could fit with the Browns, the Chiefs, the Bills, the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, obviously, those are teams that the Bengals play next year, including, of course, most notably the Chiefs and Bills, and then the Browns on week 1. They're going to play them twice a year for the Battle of Ohio. And maybe this is sort of a broad question, but like you think about those teams I just tossed. If he were to join either of those teams, where do you think he would be the hardest to stop if you're the Bengals? Like if you're Lou Anarumo and you see DeAndre Hopkins, which team him being on would make you sweat the most?
Yeah, I think the easy answer would probably be, Buffalo or Kansas City. I mean, obviously Buffalo has been kind of in desperate search for that number 2, number 3 option. I mean, they thought Gabe Davis could be that. I don't think he's a genuine number 2 in the league. I just don't. I think they're kind of forcing that. But you've got Dawson Knox there, and kind of they just drafted Dalton Kincaid, and now adding Hopkins would be good, and then obviously adding DeAndre Hopkins to Patrick Mahomes. I mean, adding anyone of quality to Patrick Mahomes is kind of a nightmare. But I actually think it's the Browns. That would be the hardest part. I wrote about this in the morning briefing. Like the Browns just traded for Elijah Moore. And if you make their receiver sets, if you go 11 personnel and you've got Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, and DeAndre Hopkins on the outside, then you've got Nick Chubb in the backfield. Like, that's a really, really difficult combination to stop. Obviously they've still got David Njoku at tight end, and that's another athletic guy in their passing offense. So I just think that he would do more for the Browns than he would for any of the other teams that he could possibly be considering. Just because, if Deshaun gets back on track, like if Deshaun turns into, the Deshaun we saw a few years ago, like 2019 Deshaun, 2020 Deshaun, that Browns team is going to be really, really good. And I just think that if you have to plan for that, if you have to kind of worry about their passing attack with Nick Chubb in the backfield, I mean, that's just a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah, I haven't seen any reports linking him to the Browns other than from the Browns people, asking, Deshaun Watson, of course he would love to have him. That makes sense. But I mean, you've seen New England, you've seen teams from the NFC East. I guess New England and the Chiefs are the ones that went after him, in terms of trade scenarios before he was released. I mean, I think the Chiefs would be tough just because, Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league. You don't want to see him, from a Bengals perspective, get more weapons. But that's the only one that I've seen that's realistically would be sort of one of the, Bengals opponents for next year.
I mean, Kansas City would be an interesting one because you just drafted Rashee Rice in the second round. You still have Marquez Valdez-Scantling. You have Sky Moore, who I know he didn't do as much at wide receiver than he did at punt returner, but you have him. And of course, Travis Kelce, who's the greatest tight end in the game right now, one of the greatest of all time. But man, you swap out Sky Moore or even swipe out MVS or whoever else I mentioned for DeAndre Hopkins. Again, I wouldn't necessarily be fearful if you're Lou Anarumo, but I think it's definitely someone to keep an eye on, because the thing with DeAndre Hopkins, maybe the counter argument I'm going to make to myself about, his production has declined the last 2 years is, his first year in Arizona, 2020, even though they were terrible, he still played pretty good. Of course, if he didn't hurt himself and if he wasn't suspended for 6 games last year, maybe he doesn't do as well as he did in his prime, when he had Deshaun Watson throwing him the ball in Houston. But he's better than your average Joe. Better than probably, I would say, Juju Smith-Schuster, who was one of, the top targets they had last year in Kansas City, or even McCole Hardman, who's with the Jets now. So I think that would be interesting, especially because you have the best player in the game, Patrick Mahomes, who can make a scrub look like an all-pro. And DeAndre Hopkins is not a scrub, so just imagine what he could do with him. I don't think this would happen, but I am with Andrew, and he says the Browns would be the most difficult to stop because, you have Amari Cooper, you have Elijah Moore, you still have DPJ, Donovan Peoples-Jones for depth. I really like David Njoku. I don't think he gets enough credit for how athletic he is. And that offensive line, I honestly believe, is the best in the AFC North. And I was talking with Dan Lobby about that yesterday. But then all of that with Nick Chubb, right behind Deshaun Watson, who wants to prove himself after he missed most of last year with his 11-game suspension. That would be crazy. And don't forget, it's not like they played together for a good 3-4 years in Houston. So that would be really interesting to see. And that would, like I said, I think it'll make Lou Anarumo sweat a little bit from his brow, but maybe not too much because, as Eli Apple once called him, he is the mad scientist. Well, speaking of the mad scientist, we're going to talk to one of the mad scientist's minions, and that is defensive tackle BJ Hill, who is quickly rising as an unsung leader on the Bengals defense and is the latest fan favorite after shaving all his hair off. We're going to hear from him as he talks about his offseason and his expectations for 2023 when we return on the Strictly Stripes podcast. And welcome back to the Strictly Stripes podcast. I'm joined by Bengals defensive tackle BJ Hill, who has obviously a very different look. But I will say, BJ, I think it's a great look. I know you obviously want the hair to grow back, but you see the camaraderie you guys have, having fun, like shaving your hair off. Clearly it just speaks to the fun you guys have in the offseason, the camaraderie. As much as you want your hair to grow back, do you at least, enjoy just taking in fun activities like this?
Oh, yeah. I had a lot of fun doing it. I'd do it all over again if I had to. It was definitely worth it. Like I said, team building, too, as well. So people, make jokes here and there. But you know what? My hair is growing back now. I'm cool with it.
Yeah, obviously, we're at the end of May. But it's almost like the energy in this locker room is as if the regular season starts next week. To have this kind of energy, this kind of excitement, why is it so important having it now with the regular season still a couple months away?
We just love ball. We love football. We love being around each other. We really cherish our time when we together on the field together and just running around, have fun. That's why we're so special. You see it each and every day in the locker room, even on the field, that we really care about football and care about each other even more.
On the field, you guys are in phase 2 workouts, OTA start next week. What do you really like about what you've seen from the defensive line so far, and how has Coach Hobby been coaching you guys up?
Coach Hobby's doing a great job with us. Going back to our fundamentals, so where it's all start from day one to the end of the season. That's what he always teaches, no matter what. That's what we can lean on all the time. But it's going really good. I'm excited for the defensive line. Like I said, we had a couple of guys. We got some young guys coming up. It's going to be very special for us this year.
Do you have any specific goals in yourself that you have like in the off season, or are you just kind of here to kind of stay in shape, stay in tune, or is it anything unique to that?
Yeah, I have goals. I like to keep them to myself though. More personal to me. So yeah.
And I guess as a defensive line, do you guys have any just overall goals as a unit?
Oh, we definitely got some of those too. We know we want to take a next step, be better than we were last year, year before. Just keep on taking steps towards being a great defense.
Last year you took a big role being a full-time starter. You played more snaps than you've ever played in your career. I mean, to go with such a heavy workload and then going into a new year after that, I mean, what do you take away from last year, and how do you build on that workload going into 2023?
I'm excited. I'm ready to attack it all over again, do it all over again if I have to. But like we got young guys coming up. We got Zach going his second year. He's going to do just fine. He's going to take some of that off a lot of us, and he's going to step up big time for us. But like I said, I'm preparing well, get my body ready for it, ready to roll.
How much of a leap do you feel like you and DJ together as a front unit, just you two up front, playing nose tackle, what kind of leap do you guys think you can take together next year?
I think we're two of the best duos in the league, man. Numbers speak. Us winning big games, helping us win big games. If you can find me two better, more power to you, but I don't think it's two better than me and him. Then you add Josh and Zach with it, man. We really got a really good interior group.
And on the other side, you guys obviously add Miles at edge rusher. What have you seen from him, and how much juice is he already adding to your all's pass rush?
Yeah, he's going to be great for us. He's still learning the defense, getting used to it, getting comfortable. I can't wait to see him when we put on the pads and get ready to go.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, just as a defense, obviously, you saw a lot of the new draft picks that were brought in, like Miles. I guess as a defense overall, just beyond the defensive line, how sharp have you guys looked at this offseason with the new guys and other guys you brought in, like Terrell, for example?
I think everybody's doing well. Everybody's getting along very well. We're communicating very well. I think that's the most important part, the communication piece, where right now, this time, we need to communicate before we put the pads on so we can get used to people's voices, how we communicate, how we just do different things. I think they're doing a great job in the back end.
I guess my last question is, now that you've been in Cincinnati for, I guess, almost 2 years now.
Going on my third year.
Third year, yeah. That's right, yeah. Yeah. It all runs together. Going on to your third year, I mean, what do you like to do in Cincinnati, especially once you guys get closer to the off-season? What do you like to do? I mean, I know you're a big photography guy. What do you like to do besides that in your spare time?
I really love Cincinnati. Man, I just like to just hang out. My favorite thing is to eat. I love good food. I like find new food spots to just try out. That's pretty much my go-to. But if I'm not in Cincinnati, if I'm in Charlotte, like Brian Four-Wheeler, shooting guns, just a little bit of country stuff that's inside me a little bit. But I really, truly love Cincinnati. I love being here. I love everything about it.
You said you're into food and stuff. Is there any food here that you just absolutely love? Any spots that you're high on?
I guess you could say even the known places you got E&O, you got Soto, you got Jeff Ruby's. Those types of places are probably my favorite three.
Yeah, man, I was going to say, Cincinnati, I've been here for, almost 8 months now, so I'm still learning the spots myself, and I'm sure everyone else listening to this is learning as well. But that's Bengals defensive tackle, BJ Hill. BJ, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Don't go away. We'll be right back on the Strictly Stripes podcast. And thanks for staying with us on the Strictly Stripes podcast. Before we jump back into our discussion, looking ahead to OTAs next week, I forgot to mention this earlier, but we want to remind you all, and I mean you, the listener, the fan, to go to strictlystripes.com and tell us why you're a Bengals fan. Click on the link that says, why I'm a Bengals fan. Tell us your story. There's going to be a Google Docs form that opens up. It's a survey you fill out. You tell us when you became a fan, why you became a fan, and why you are so passionate about the Cincinnati Bengals. We're already getting a lot of responses, which we're going to share on this podcast in the coming days and weeks. And if you have a super awesome, authentic response, we will definitely have you on this podcast. I will keep my word on that. So if I don't do it, use this podcast to hold me against it. We will have some of the best answers, if we can, on this podcast. So go to strictlystripes.com and fill out that form. So we obviously talked about the here and now with DeAndre Hopkins and what could happen with him and what that means for the Bengals. Now I want to sort of spin back things to Cincinnati. Of course, the Bengals are wrapping up phase 2 workouts this week. The month of June is upon us. We're recording this on a Wednesday. It's June 1st tomorrow, which means OTAs are next Tuesday, and then you have mandatory minicamp the week after that. Now that, like I said, phase 2 is just about in the books, and we're really starting to wrap up the offseason before training camp, what are the most interesting things you're looking for, or the biggest questions you have for the Bengals going into OTAs next week for either of you guys?
It's funny. It's not much because they aren't doing much. They limit the 11-11 work. They full speed stuff's almost non-existent. They're a walkthrough pace. I don't know what you gain from this. I mean, it's not even, you're out there right now with the phase 2 stuff, and it's just they're, thrown against air, and I don't know what we could take, from all this. I think, the only question really was, will Jonah Williams show up, and what kind of shape will he be in terms of his health? I mean, I think he'll be in good shape. I think he's been working out. He's shown videos on social media, but I mean, other than that, in terms of on the field stuff, I'm really not sure what you're supposed to learn from these.
Well, I think the interesting thing is, like, well, you're right. I mean, compared to like other teams who literally they're already having their OTAs, like the Browns and the Chiefs, and many other teams, like there's a lot more action, obviously. And the thing with the Bengals where their offseason is different is they're not really doing much contact. They're not really doing those 11-on-11s that they did early in the Zach Taylor era, and of course, before that with his predecessor Marvin Lewis. But I mean, I think it makes sense, though. I mean, yeah, there really isn't anything tangible to take away other than like the Jonah Williams question, which is a whole nother topic. But I think it makes sense, though, because you don't want to like risk guys getting hurt. You want to sort of trust a philosophy that I think they've had dating back to last year after they went to the Super Bowl. Because I think with Zach Taylor, he's sort of tiptoeing that fine line of how do you keep guys in peak performance, shape before they come up for training camp in a month. But how do you also do so without risking an injury or, risking a guy getting hurt? Because that's the last thing you want, whether it's the new guys or veterans or rookies. You want to sort of walk that fine line. And I think the approach makes sense. Like, do you either guys kind of agree with the philosophy Zach Taylor's kind of putting into this offseason so far?
Well, I mean, in terms of, you're asking in terms of just kind of not putting them through these like rigorous kind of workouts, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to agree with it because look at the injury reports the last 2 years. I mean, they haven't really been, very injured, and kind of everything that happens is, okay, La'el Collins gets his leg rolled into, and Jonah Williams gets his leg rolled into, and Alex Kappa gets his leg rolled into. Like, Cheeto has, a weird play where he's trying to cover Amari Cooper, who I think it was Amari, going across the middle, and his knee kind of buckles. Like, they're not kind of soft tissue things that just kind of pop up. They're very rare. Those things happen, not very frequently. So, I think you kind of have to agree with it at this point.
Yeah, I think it'll be the first thing that gets blamed, though, if they don't do well, by fans at least, that they didn't take advantage of all the practice time that they have and things like that. I think it's in theory, as long as you're successful, but in terms of the injury numbers, like, I mean, we don't have the percentages of like comparing it to teams that use all 10 of their OTAs and do more 11-on-11 stuff. I mean, it's hard to say definitively one way or another that works or not. I mean, it's just a small sample size with last year. I think it works for them because they have a lot of veterans that it won't necessarily impact them on the field. But if they struggle, I think it'll be an easy thing to point to be like, maybe they should have taken advantage of those extra practices because, you're leaving things that other teams are using to their benefit on the table. And it could be tricky. I think it's a bolder move to not do that.
I think it's a double-edged sword. I mean, yeah, like on the one hand, you're keeping veterans healthy, you're keeping them from re-aggravating any previous injuries. But at the same time, you have rookies like, Chase Brown and Miles Murphy, like guys who you want to make an impact right away. And if you don't maybe utilize them as best as you could, or you don't give them some extra reps or extra practices, and then maybe you look at how they perform next year, you'll say, well, gosh, why didn't Zach Taylor make those guys do more workouts, or why didn't they do more like hands-on stuff, 11-on-11s, however you want to pick it out. Like, you could look at that and say, oh man, those Bengals, they didn't push hard enough. They didn't get those pads going. But I think that, like the saying goes, obviously, and it's cliche, but it makes sense. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think this has worked for the Bengals since last year. It worked for them after they went to the Super Bowl. They almost went back this year. And, there's some guys who you don't want to see them get hurt, like DJ Reader missed almost half the season last year with a knee injury. Sam Hubbard, when he was a rookie with Marvin Lewis, he injured, I believe it was his shoulder, one of his upper body muscles, his first rookie mini camp OTA with Marvin Lewis. Granted, it was a different era with a different coach, but he went through it. Other guys have probably been through it with other teams, like other free agents that have joined on. So they've seen it, and I think that approach makes sense. The big thing is you want to obviously develop the camaraderie, which, like BJ Hill talked about, when you got guys shaving each other's hair off in the month of May, it gives you regular season-like vibes. And I know chemistry and culture and all those terms are cliche, but there's definitely something intangible there that you get out of the culture they have during off-season workouts like this. Just to kind of wrap this all up, like I mentioned earlier, we're taping this podcast, we're less than 24 hours away from the month of June. Obviously, the weather is gorgeous and beautiful outside, and I'm actually about to go outside right after we finish this podcast. What do you guys like to do in the month of June? Do you like to go to the park? Do you like to swim? Like, what do Mike and Andrew like to do when the month of June strikes the calendar?
Nothing.
That's good. I like that too.
Yeah, especially kind of working in the NFL, covering the NFL. It's June is the month where it's a little bit kind of like the last month of school vibes, which is, I guess, fitting because June is the last month of school. You get like that second week of June hits, and then everybody's like, all right, I'll see you in 5 weeks. And so yeah, I mean, go and do cookouts, a lot of outdoor patio beers. Those are nice. There's a place I like in Oakley where I live called Mad Tree. That's a nice little spot to kind of go hang out on on a not so hot night. So yeah, I mean, just kind of whatever activities you can do outside, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's just different when you have kids. I mean, that's sort of it's summertime until you take care of them during the summer, so it's not really, time to sort of relax. So, just a bit different.
Yeah, I knew the kids were going to come up, which I totally get because I was once their age and my parents were once in your shoes. So I sympathize and empathize with you on that. Honestly, I just love to travel. There's definitely a lot of places I want to go this summer. I may go to Dallas with my cousin in a few weeks. I'll be in Columbus next week. Just came back from Nashville with my brother. Might make another trip out west. I'm not sure. Maybe in July. Hint, hint. I don't know. But I love to travel, which I didn't get to do a lot, obviously, with COVID and stuff. So I've been doing more of it in the past calendar year. So I am going to be on the road again. But don't worry, we'll still be here, and we will be back here tomorrow and for the rest of the week, all the way through the rest of OTAs and minicamp. But once again, for myself, Mike, and Andrew, I'm Mohammad Ahmad. See you Thursday.